guys, thanks very much. So my name's Mel. I'm the Vice President of the Monash Association of Debaters. So you can think of me as like the Hillary to Sam's Barack, but like obviously better. So what I'm going to do firstly is pass around some attendance forms. If everyone can pop their name, their student number, this will help you to remember it really quickly and really easily. And there's some other questions. So if you want to debate tonight, you can fill that in. Or if you want to know more information about Easters, which is the tournament that happens over the mid-semester break, which Sam sort of flagged, you can fill that in as well. If at some point these fill up and we need more forms, if someone can just raise their hand and let me know and I'll organise that. Alright guys, so as you would have heard, and as I think you've sort of hopefully worked out by now, this session is an introduction to university debating. So it's going to assume a few things. It's going to assume that you have debated probably with the Debaters Association of Victoria before, or the DAV, and so you did the school's Year 9 to Year 12 competition. Alternatively, you might have done some debating through the SIS or the Associated Catholic Schools if you are from Victoria. I know there are some people from interstate here, so hopefully you would have done something similar in a 3-on-3 kind of format before. If you feel like maybe that isn't as familiar to you as you thought, feel free to go into the next session, which BLT, also known as Andrew, is running. That may be of more use for you, but you are very welcome to stay here if you are familiar with debating already. There is no judgment. So, introduction to uni debating. So, things you should know about uni debating. It is similar to what you would have done in school, so same, but different. At university, unlike in school where there is typically just one form of debating, here we do 3 different styles of debating across the year. So the first one which we do, which is the one you are familiar with, is called Easters style. So that is 2 teams of 3 people on each team. That should be pretty familiar to you. There are 2 other styles which we do here at Monash. A thing called Australs, which is 3-on-3, so the same Easter style, but then with something called reply speeches. So that's where at the end of the debate, both teams then have another speech which they make, which we will teach you later in the semester. Don't stress about it now. In second semester, we do a completely different thing, and that's called British Parliamentary style or World style. Has anyone heard of that before? Cool. So I know that the DAV runs a tournament of it, so some of you might be familiar with it already. So the way that BP works is that there are 4 teams of 2 people, and so there is still like an affirmative side and a negative side, although it's slightly different. All you guys need to worry about for now is Easter style, which I'm assuming everyone is familiar with. So the debate setup. Again, like I said, it's kind of the same as DAV, but different. There is an affirmative and there is a negative team. There are 3 team members on each team. All speeches are 6 to 8 minutes, which means there will be 1 knock or 1 clap at 6 minutes, and then 2 at 8 minutes. And so if you're not used to speaking to that time, that's okay. It's the kind of thing which you can build up to. There's no expectation to do it perfectly the first time you speak. But you will soon realise that 8 minutes is not a lot of time in a speech at all. So unlike school, where you might be used to 1 hour prep time for prepared or advised, for advised topics or for secret topics, we have 30 minutes of prep time, and all the debates which we do are secret topics. So you won't have preparation before. There will be things that you get half an hour to prepare on. If anyone has any questions, pop your hand up at any time. If I don't see you because I'm quite blind, please make noise and I will answer accordingly. Cool. So, briefly, I'll go through speaker roles. I assume that everyone knows what these are from having done debating. So, the first affirmative, they define the debate. Unlike school, where often people do really awful definitions, and so if the topic was like, that we should invade Syria, they might be like, by invade we mean we will have tanks and planes and cars, and by Syria we mean a country in the Middle East. We would do a far more quick and useful definition. And so at university we might say something when it's define the debate. We might say the topic is that we should invade Syria, and by that we obviously mean that the West or NATO or the United Nations should invade Syria. And you can probably assume that everyone knows what Syria is. And so you would provide a model if necessary. That is something which we'll discuss more as the weeks go on, but that kind of is similar to school in that if you were doing something like banning or that we should do something, then there will be a way or a mechanism of implementing that. Afterwards, the first affirmative speaker needs to provide substantive argumentation, and so they need to have their own points. You'll find that most affirmative speakers, or first affirmative speakers, will have 3 to 4 points. 3 is a good number. 2 is probably too few. 4 suggests that maybe you've rushed through things. So you should aim for 3, but that is something which we're not prescriptive about. It's just the best way to do it. For the first negative speaker, obviously you will rebut the first affirmative speaker. You'll provide a counter-model if necessary, and then you'll provide your own substantive points. Is this similar to what everyone has sort of done in school? Please nod if that seems the case. Okay, I'll move quickly through this stuff then. For the second affirmative and negative speakers, they do the same thing, so they will rebut the other team, and then they will provide their own substantive argumentation. Something that second speakers often fall into the habit of doing is not providing their own arguments and kind of disguising their second speech as a third speech. That is not correct. You, at second, still must provide substantive argumentation that furthers your case. So then the third affirmative and negative speakers will do thematic rebuttal. And so I'm sure this is a word which you've all heard, because it's the kind of thing which DAV adjudicators love to tell third speakers, that they have not done thematic rebuttal and that they should just do thematic rebuttal next time. From my experiences of school, where I didn't go to one of those schools where we got a coach, and so no one ever explained it to me, at the end of every round someone was like, "That was a great speech, thematic rebuttal next time," and I was like, what does this mean? So if that is you, we will cover that. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with thematic rebuttal and know what it means. Having done too much DAV adjudication in my time, most people who think they're doing thematic rebuttal are still not doing thematic rebuttal. So I'm going to discuss it briefly, although it's the kind of thing which, if you are interested in, there are plenty of opportunities to learn about more. So thematic rebuttal is where you rebut the other team's argumentation based not on a kind of shopping list of the first affirmative speaker said this, and then they said this. You do it based on the themes, and you have the right as the speaker to decide what those themes are, and you decide where the arguments get responded to and what order. And so you don't follow that kind of shopping list of this person said this, that person said that. You kind of present the debate in a more holistic approach. And so requirements of that is that you need to be comparative as a third speaker. And so it's not just that the other team said this, that is wrong. It is that the other team said this, and then we said this, and then you analyse those things in a comparative fashion to then show why your team was correct. A good strategy of doing that is to ask questions. So saying something, at the end of this debate, I have 3 questions. The first is, what is the role of the government? And then you can branch things under that. It's not the kind of thing which you will be good at the first time you try it, and if you are, that's not fair. But it's the kind of thing that the more you do it and the more you watch it done well and you understand it, you will be better at it. It took me a really long time to get a good grasp of this, and some would say I still don't have a good grasp of this, but don't be intimidated by it. We really want you to understand what it means and be able to do it, but there is no expectation you do it perfectly the first time. Cool. So what should my speech look like? Because this is where the differences between high school debating and university debating become really apparent. The stuff I've already talked about is probably really familiar to you already. So unlike high school debating, university debating is less prescriptive. And what I mean by that is there are less kind of official rules which you must follow in the way that you use your 8 minutes of allotted speaking time. And so there isn't these prescriptive rules about you have to do your rebuttal first and then you have to offer argumentation. Lots of people do things like integrating their rebuttal and their substantive, and there are lots of different techniques people use in their own quest to become a persuasive speaker. And so you don't have to keep it as structured in the way which you are taught to do so in high school and in the way that most adjudicators for the DAV are looking for. So keep that in mind, particularly in the debate which you watch tonight. You will watch people with very different speaking, if you choose to watch the debate, and you probably should because it's good. You will see people with very different speaking styles who structure their speeches in very different ways. And so be aware of that, and it's the kind of thing where you can watch different people speak and decide what you find the most convincing and how you want to present yourself. So, a question that often comes up is, how much time do you dedicate to your substantive argumentation against your rebuttal? And like I said, there is no rule about the way that you must do things, but you always have to make this is just for the first and second speaker, obviously, but you always need to make a substantive contribution. You can't have 8 minutes of rebuttal and be given a particular compelling speech. And so what I would suggest is when you're transitioning into university debating, that you should aim for a maximum 4 minutes of rebuttal if you are the first negative speaker or the second affirmative or negative speaker. So that is something I would just suggest you keep in mind when it comes to giving a speech, how you weight your substantive and your rebuttal. Cool, so the scoring range. It is very similar to the way which you would have been scored in the DAV if you did that. So the scoring range for EASTers, which is the same scoring range we'll use for internal competitions if you do the novice competition or if we do practice debates, is from 60 to 90. So even though technically a debate is out of 100, you will never see a score outside of the range of 60 to 90. The average score is a 75. And that is average for the tournament. So some tournaments, if you go to them, the average of 75 will be of a higher standard than what it is at other tournaments. Does that distinction make sense? Okay, very good. So you would have seen on DAB score sheets, assuming most of you have come through that route, is that when you look at the score sheet, there is a breakdown of method, manner and matter on the score sheet, and that two of them, manner and matter, are judged out of 30 and method is judged out of 15, and that adjudicators will work out from that what your end score is. I'm sure some of you have already done DAV adjudication and would have realised that is a very artificial way of judging a debate, and that's not actually how anyone really judges a debate. And so when someone gives you a score, it won't be based on a breakdown of those three things. It'll just be kind of the vibe of the speech. And so don't be looking for those three indicators anymore. That's not the way that university debating works. And so something to keep in mind with scoring is, in general, it's a pretty artificial way of measuring yourself, much like your ENTER score, ATAR score, or your uni grades. It is an artificial thing. So in debating, scores can give you an idea of how you went, but different adjudicators will give you different. Some people are harsh markers, some people are what we call highballers and very generous with their scores. So don't buy into the idea of if you were used to getting 76s and all of a sudden you got a 74, that means you are now a bad debater. It just means that that adjudicator scored you that way based on a number of factors. After many, many years of debating, I would get an average score in this format of 77 to 78. And sometimes I pull out like a 75 and I'm just like, excuse me, like, did you not watch that debate? But it doesn't, I may have done bad, but it also could be a number of other factors. And so don't buy into scores too much, especially when you are first starting debating. It is pretty artificial. Other things. So this is probably the most exciting thing about university debating compared to school debating, is that the topics which we choose in university are super different to the ones that you would have done in the DAV or the school's debate. So I sit on the committee that chooses the school topics, and we have a number of considerations which we have to take into account. We can't offend anybody. There are a number of really conservative schools in the competition which we have to bear in mind. So anything to do with like race, religion, gender, often we have to steer clear of in those kind of tournaments because we just don't know who's doing the debates and we can't offend them. At university, we assume that by virtue of being here, you are interested in academic thought and different kinds of ideas. And so you will come up against topics which will challenge your ways of thinking and are slightly more interesting. We don't do like complete crazy things all of the time, but you will certainly encounter debates that you won't have seen in the school's competition before, and I'm sure you can understand why that is the case. So I want to talk about 3 different types of topics that you will experience whilst at university, and particularly in the next couple of weeks. So the first one is what an old Monash debater now at Sydney, Chris Bisset, calls debaterland topics. So these are the kinds of topics which would never actually happen in the real world, but are just generally interesting ideas about things that we should maybe do. And so those are the kinds of ideas which will sort of push what you know. You might not have thought about them before, but they are often the most interesting and fun debates to be a part of. The other 2 types of debating, which you will already be familiar with if you have done school debating, is firstly what's called an imperative topic. And that's where there is like an impetus for doing the debate. And those kinds of have debates that we should ban this, or this house would do something. And so that requires the affirmative team to set some kind of action. It's like a problem solution kind of thing. Does anyone have any questions about what? And I'll go through some examples next. That might clear it up, actually. The second kind of debate is an empirical debate. So that's a kind of debate which is grounded in principle and where you compare two different ideas, but there's no practical outcome of that. And so you're not actually doing anything. You're just comparing different things. Also, something you should keep in mind is that we have different actors in debates, and so what that means is that sometimes you will be the government, like the affirmative team will be the government. Other times the affirmative team might be a different actor. And so in an Australs, which is the Australasian Championships, in one of the finals last year, the topic was something that this house as the Muslim Brotherhood, and so you had to take on that the affirmative was the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And so you can understand how that absolutely changes the way that the debate happens. So you're not always going to be the government. If you're the actor, you will sometimes be other people. We often have debates like, I don't want to get into the most rogue examples, but we do things like, as a socially progressive person, this house would do this, and things like that. So some examples. Oh, okay, I've put one there. So the Debaterland kind of topic, which lends itself to being an empirical topic anyways, is that socially progressive parents should raise gender-neutral children. And so in that example, the affirmative is not the government, but are socially progressive parents. Please nod if that makes sense, or feel free to raise your hand if that doesn't make sense, because I didn't get it the first time someone tried to explain it to me. Okay, very good. So you can understand how we challenge our ways of thinking, and we don't always do things that are necessarily straightforward in university debating as distinct to school debating. So an imperative topic is that we should abolish tax exempt status. Oh, sorry. No, and so in that kind of debate, socially progressive parents, the other side doesn't necessarily have a role. Their job is to explain why that is a bad idea or why that would be worse in society or something like that. So they don't take on like a counter force necessarily, but yeah, you would still argue against the idea broadly. Does anyone else have any questions about that? That was a very good question. Yeah?
Just a question about university debating in general. In high school DAB debating, most of the topics took a very heavy focus on Australia and isolated from the international world in some respects anyway.
Yeah.
Is university debating a little more global?
Yeah, it is, particularly because we compete at international tournaments. Last year, the World Championships were in India, and there were a lot of topics, particularly about things like the Ukraine, India specific. We did a topic on Japan, and so I'm sure lots of you who are studying law or arts, like myself and like many other debaters, will have a lot of knowledge about international relations, be really interested in the world around you. We do spend a lot of time talking about those kinds of things. There is much less of an Australia focus, and if anything, we actively discourage that focus because we compete internationally a number of times a year, and at those forums you can't make Australia-specific examples. And so, yeah, we actually do tend to talk more broadly about Western liberal democracies, like the Asia-Pacific region, NATO, the coalition, of the UK and the US and Australia. So we do things that are a little more global in their nature, which I think is more interesting than another debate about Australian values, but that's just me. Okay, so onto an imperative topic. So that would be that we should do something. So in this case, it's that we should abolish the tax-exempt status for religious organisations. And so what that requires of the affirmative team is to define tax-exempt status and religious organisations in a very normal way, but then to provide a model as to how we actually go about solving that kind of thing, or a model as to how we would implement that. It doesn't always have to be very detailed, it can be very brief, and sometimes debates can work without them, but you can understand that an imperative debate requires the affirmative to actually do something. The last kind of debate which I flagged was an empirical debate, why did I put the same debate twice? Why would I do that? That is dumb by me, but the Debaterland topic is also an empirical topic, so we'll just work with that. Cool. So this is the most exciting part, I think. For Easters and for Australs, and pretty much for all things that you will do in first semester, you don't get given a topic. You get given 3 topics from which you may select. And so this is what makes it interesting, in that you actually have some discretion and choice over what you talk about. So the way that it works, please bear with me while I explain this, it's a little complicated, is that 3 topics will appear usually on a board like this. So, as a team, you will preference those topics. So, if you will put next to the topic which you want to debate, a 1. For the second choice, a 2. And then the topic which you don't want to debate, you get to veto. So if there's something which you absolutely hate or know nothing about, you don't have to debate it, which is like awesome. And so you put a veto next to it. And so the 2 teams have put down what they want to do in the debate. The way that it works next is that the teams will meet up and have a discussion about what they did. So the first thing you will do is find out what you vetoed, because the way that it usually works is that the affirmative will have vetoed whatever the first choice of the negative team was, and vice versa, because something you think is easy from the affirmative, the negative team probably vetoed. Makes sense that it works the other way. And so if you veto different topics, that means that there is 1 topic left, and that is the topic which you debate. If you have preferenced the same topic but vetoed other ones, so if you both have the same one, you obviously do that topic. The only time it is slightly confusing is when you have vetoed the same topic but have different preferences for 1 and 2, and in the truly democratic way, we toss a coin. That I know is a little bit complicated. That will be explained to you again before you need to do it, and again, because it doesn't matter how long you've been at uni and how long you've been debating, it's really complicated, for me anyways. So, yeah, you will get that covered again, but be aware that the differences between school and university is that you have some discretion over what you debate. Cool. The last couple of things I want to talk about, the first of which is manner. So now that you're at university and no longer at school, your manner is more adult. So there isn't those kind of strict requirements that you would have had at school, like good afternoon, adjudicator, other team, teachers, which is like not strong, but people do it anyways. So there is no expectation that you will do those kinds of things. Please don't do them. They're not great to be watching. But like, you will find a kind of way of presenting which you feel comfortable with and which works for you. Despite me saying that you don't give that kind of weird introduction, there is still a sort of decorum around debating which you need to observe. And so you will address the adjudicator, you could say like adjudicator, but you'll often find people do things like address the audience as ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chair, Mr. Speaker, and so you shouldn't address the adjudicator in a non-formal way. You just don't have to do that kind of rigid introduction. You'll see in the debate tonight, if you choose to watch it, the way that different people go about observing that decorum, and how that works. So, everyone at university debating will have different manner. No one presents exactly the same. That is not only okay, that is a good thing. The way that you should speak is as the best version of yourself. So whatever you feel comfortable with, the way that you would normally present, is what you should do. You should just be like you in a conversation, but better. And so everyone will find something that works for you. Lots of people try out different styles of speaking. Some people are really good at having a really sassy style of speaking, which is super energetic and kind of in your face. Other people have a far more relaxed, casual tone. Do whatever works for you. Don't feel like there is a correct way that you need to present. Just do what you feel comfortable with. That being said, definitely learn from others. There's a lot of people at Monash who are very experienced and very good speakers, and particularly if you so choose to go to like Intervarsity tournaments, you will see some great speakers, and you can learn a lot, just not about how to debate, but also just how to be a really persuasive public speaker, and how to present in a really convincing style, which is always super useful for whatever you do in life. The last thing is to always be polite. As you would have worked out in your first couple of days of uni, that you don't necessarily know people, and that continues on as you go to intervarsity tournaments or internal competitions. As much as it's fine in your speech to be a bit sassy, to have a go at the other team and stuff, please be nice still. You know, just like regular polite behaviour is always welcome in all walks of society and life. So just work with that. Scoring again, not good. Okay, so how are university and school debates different? So other things. Something we notice a lot at MAD, and something I notice a lot adjudicating, is there is like some trend that happens in almost every school, organic of everything else, is that if you are the best speaker at your school, and I'm sure lots of you were, judging by your interest in continuing university debating, for some reason, teams always put their best speaker at third. That sometimes isn't necessarily the best idea. Can you chuck your hand up if you usually speak third? Okay, it's probably like half the room. Obviously, we're going to have to, over debating, spread that out to only a third of you continuing to be third speakers. So be open-minded about, I spoke third for like 6 years in high school and like thought I was the world's best third speaker, and then got to university and someone was like, this isn't for you. And it really threw me for a week, and then I embraced being a second speaker. Now I'm a really good second speaker. And so be open-minded to the idea that you will speak in different positions to what you're comfortable with, and that those things are a good idea and will make you a better debater. So, other things about university and school debating. So we don't have prepared topics. Unlike the DAV, where when you have a secret topic, it is such an obvious secret topic that like you probably should know something about it. The topics here you should know things about if you are an engaged global citizen. So that means that you should be doing things like reading the paper every couple of days. Feel free to watch some educational documentaries. Not all debates are super hard and super content heavy, but some debates are. And if you want to do well in those debates, you need to know some things. And once you know some things, you should probably learn a few more things. The speakers who are the best in the world, or even just, particularly good, really enjoy learning and really get a lot out of learning lots of new and interesting things. And that doesn't mean you learn about international relations exclusively and all the times. Over the course of debating, I have become somewhat of an expert on Iran sanctions, and that's purely through reading lots of things all of the time. And the things that you learn in debating, you can then use in all of your classes, so it's not like you're investing lots of time into something new. It just makes you a smarter person, and that is always a good thing. So you will use your brain in challenging and stimulating ways, much in a way that some of you may have found school debating a little bit easy. This is far more challenging and just a lot more fun. University is better than school in general. So why should you do debating? Debating is fun. You'll meet cool people. You get to... So the next point is actually true. You get to travel to fun places. 6 months after I started university, I got to go to the Philippines for 2 weeks to go to Manila and this beautiful place called Boracay. It was absolutely awesome. Last year I went to India, the Philippines, Malaysia. The year before that I got to go to Berlin. And so there's heaps of really awesome travel opportunities. You'll go to places that you never thought that you would go to in the next couple of years with a really fun group of people. You'll debate for a week, and then you'll have a couple of weeks of party. That is really fun and a really good way to experience some interesting things that you might not otherwise have the chance to do. Like I said, debating genuinely makes you smarter. It makes you think in ways that you're not used to thinking. It's not the same rote learning of VCE that you're probably used to. And that's the thing that I've enjoyed most about debating, the way that it makes me think far smarter. And that's probably a good thing. If nothing else, if you're not already convinced that debating is awesome, it is a great extracurricular activity to have in your CV. I know that in your first year of university, you're probably not thinking about applying for jobs and that kind of thing down the line, and nor should you. You should be having fun. But it never hurts to be like, oh, I was on the Monash debating, I was a part of the Monash Debating Association and I went to this tournament. That is never a bad thing to have credited to your name. And we mentioned that there is free pizza every week, all the time. And if you have weird dietary requirements, Jesse's Pizza would love to accommodate those for you. So, further opportunities. So, if some of you, I know, having seen some of you in the DAV rounds before, I know some of you are super keen about this kind of thing. So if you haven't already and you want to get involved in debating more, there are some opportunities for you. You can join DAV Adjudicating. Can you put your hand up if you have heard of this or have already done the training? Oh, so many. Okay, great. I also work at the DAV. I'm the Training and Development Administrator, so my life is all debating all the time. But if you haven't done it, The reasons that you should do it is that you get paid to adjudicate, and it's pretty interesting and easy work. And if you enjoy debating, it's not that hard to watch a couple of hours of debates and get paid for it. We will be running a training session here next week. So if you're interested in doing that, just let me know. That means you don't have to come into our offices in North Melbourne. You can just do it here next week. So please speak to me if that's something that sounds interesting to you. Alternatively, I can send you to the website where you can sign up. There's also a not-for-profit organisation called Free Debate, which some of the people here are involved with. That does a lot of work in helping a lot of different groups with public speaking and debating. And so if you were interested in maybe doing some volunteer work, that is a great organisation to do it with. Please speak to me if that's something you're interested in. Other things that are interesting, the national schools competition's been held in Melbourne this year. So if you want to go watch some different states debate, those children are very talented. There's the option to do that if you're really interested. If you don't want to debate at university, you can adjudicate. I adjudicated at my first tournament at my first international tournament rather, and that was a great choice. I watched some incredible debates. I became a much better debater from having done it. So if you don't feel like debating is something you want to try just yet, maybe have a go at adjudicating and see if you enjoy that instead. Alternatively, there is a thing called tabbing, which is where you make the draws for debates. It is mathematical. I do not understand it, but if you like numbers, you may like that. And the last thing is, as you would have heard, Monash is hosting the Australian University Debating Championships, which we call Easters because it's always held over the Easter weekend. So last year it was in the Gold Coast at Griffith University, so that was awesome. You would know that Melbourne is not as glorious in its party as the Gold Coast, but it'll still be really fun. If you're interested, you can volunteer for that. It's a great way to get involved without necessarily the sort of commitment of debating. But yeah, if you're interested in doing that, please also speak to us. We can send you to the right places. And now I think that is it.